Hello guys, in this video let's discuss network design for application gateway, and then we will discuss a typical network design for our complete web app, that is hub and spoke design. Now guys, if you see this screen, we have a web app hosted in VM and we also have a web app hosted in app service. And then we have this application gateway, and this application gateway, it is present in its own VNet and subnet. And also this VM, that is the VM where we have web app, it is also present in its own VNet and its own subnet. So obviously the first thing, we should restrict the direct access from public internet to this web app, that is to this web app and to this web app. So the direct access, that should be blocked. And this web app, it should be accessible only through application gateway. Great. So guys, the first thing, again the VNet for application gateway and the VNet for VM, these are different. So first we will need to create VNet pairing. Without VNet pairing, this application gateway, it will not be able to access this VM. Then we should create energy for this subnet. And this energy, it should allow the traffic only from this application gateway, right? And guys, of course, now we need to connect to this VM remotely as well, right? So instead of using RDP, we should use Bastion. So to remotely connect to this VM, we should use Bastion, and then web traffic, that should be allowed only from this application gateway. Now we may also have a web app hosted in app service, right? And again, this web app should be accessible only from application gateway, and for this we should create private endpoint. Now guys, assume the backend database for both these web apps is this Azure SQL DB. Okay, so first, the direct public access to this Azure SQL DB, that should be blocked. And we should allow the access to this Azure SQL DB from this VNet, that is the VNet which has VM using private endpoint. That means the access from this VM, it should be allowed to this Azure SQL DB using private endpoint. And again, we may have a web app hosted in app service, and again the backend database is this Azure SQL DB. So for this, first we should use something called VNet integration, and then we should create a private endpoint from this app service to this Azure SQL DB. And guys, now this brings us to this hub and spoke design. So if you see this, we have a separate VNet for application gateway, we have a separate VNet for our front-end layer, and we have a separate VNet for our back-end layer. And these VNets, they are connected using VNet peering. And now you can imagine that with this hub and spoke design, our web app is much more secure. So it's because this back-end VNet, it is accessible only from this front-end VNet. This front-end VNet, it is accessible only from this application gateway. And finally, the most of security attacks on our web app, they are handled by this application gateway. So that's it guys. Thanks for listening.